Welcome into the Jazz Notes podcast. Ben Anderson.
I'm Chandler Holt.
This is an emergency podcast. We recorded on Monday. Today is Tuesday, as the Utah Jazz have just pulled off a blockbuster.
Yes.
Blockbuster trade. One of the biggest trades in Utah Jazz history. Acquiring two-time All-Star Jaren Jackson Jr. from the Memphis Grizzlies in a deal with a lot of moving pieces, though only two teams involved.
Yes.
You know, this is not a 3-team, 4-team, 5-team trade.
7 players.
7 players, but relatively straightforward. So here's the whole deal. Coming to Utah, Jaren Jackson Jr., John Conchar, Jock Lyondale, Vince Williams Jr. Going to Memphis, Kyle Anderson, former Grizzly, George Niang, former Jazzman, Taylor Hendricks, former lottery pick, and Walt Clayton Jr., who you know my affinity for Walt Clayton Jr.
Yes.
I've been a big Walt fan. So 4 players going out for the Utah Jazz, 4 players coming in. So the Jazz don't have to make another move. The Jazz don't have to waive anybody or clear anybody. The Jazz's roster is full at 15 players, so they couldn't take back extra players. They send out 4, they get 4 back.
Yeah.
All right. I guess let's get to Jaren Jackson Jr. Let's start right on that, and then we can get over the rest of it. Jaren Jackson Jr. is exactly the player the Jazz need.
Oh, yes.
Now, that is archetype-wise. We will see on the floor how he ends up fitting, how he likes Utah. I'm actually not worried about that aspect. He's like super high caliber character guy by all accounts. But, you know, if it's going to work, we don't know yet.
Yes.
But when you are looking at what the Jazz don't do well and what they need, if you just kind of say, like, we're going to narrow the pool down from 450 NBA players to 100, and then 100 to 50, and then 50 to 5, and you do that by saying, well, what's the Jazz's biggest weakness? It's defense.
Yes.
And then you say, okay, well, how do you improve your defense? The big guy.
Yeah.
Okay, then you want to make sure that you have a good defensive big guy who actually fits your timeline. Okay, so everybody 30 and over is out of the conversation. And you're probably not getting Victor Wembanyama. So he's out of the conversation. So you're looking at guys between the ages of 23 and 29 years old. And the list just narrows and narrows and narrows. And if you do that enough times, you end up with 2 names, in my opinion, that I thought the Jazz would seriously look at this summer if they didn't land a top 3 draft pick. And I thought those names were going to be Bam Adebayo and Jaren Jackson Jr.
Yeah.
And they don't go for Bam because Miami wants to get Giannis.
Yeah.
Well, Giannis could be in this conversation as well. But they end up with Jaren Jackson Jr. It just, from it makes perfect sense standpoint, it makes perfect sense. Like, the trade is exactly what the Jazz need.
This year, Triple J, he's averaging 19.2 points, 5.8 rebounds, 1.9 assists, shooting about 48% from the field. When they first made this trade, in my head, for some reason, I think of Jaren Jackson as like 29, maybe 30 years old. He's 26.
Yeah, he's 26. He's a baby.
Yes. And he, in 2023, 3 years ago, he was the Defensive Player of the Year, which means he did that at 23 years old or 24 years old.
Conceivably should be entering his prime right now.
Yes.
He's been in his prime for a little bit, but yeah, remember, he came in, I don't remember exactly, but he came out of Michigan State, and I don't think he reclassified. I don't know if players were doing that back then, but he was one of the youngest players in the draft his year. So he is, compared to other guys who have been in the league since that draft, that was also the Luka draft and the Trae Young draft, et cetera, he was young even by those standards.
Yes. I also want to point out, it's kind of an odd year for the Grizzlies this year. They've had John Morant stuff they've been dealing with, injuries in and out of the lineup, weird lineups. Last year, if we go back, he played 74 games last year, 22.2 points, 49% from the floor, and also shot almost 38% from 3 on 5 attempts. And when you think about a player that will fit perfectly, assuming you're keeping Larry Markkinen and Walker Kessler, I think Jaren Jackson slides in perfectly there at the 4. A lot of people are questioning if this means something for Walker Kessler's future. I don't think that is necessarily correlated, not to say something like that will not happen now, but I think Jaren Jackson is the perfect 4-man between those two.
I'm curious, because here's what I do like. I like Lowry at the 4.
Yeah,
I like Lowry playing a little bigger because I think he's a real mismatch for other 4s that have to chase him and chase him and chase him off the ball.
Very true.
And if he's going to be the 4, that means you have to have a 5 next to him, and Jaren Jackson Jr. does what I think the Jazz have fallen in love with. And here, this is the background of this, I think. I think the Jazz saw the spacing that they got from Jusuf Nurkic by having a 5 who can step out and is nowhere near the deep threat that Jaren Jackson Jr. is. Jaren Jackson Jr. is a good 3-point shooter, and just fell in love with the space. And they said, look at what it did for Keontae George. Look at what it's done for Lowry. How do we maximize that space? And I think when you look at Jaren Jackson Jr. historically, The Grizzlies have tried to play him at the 4, though he also plays some time at the 5. Like, they went out and drafted Zach Edey, so he didn't have to be a full-time 5, but they also can use him as a backup 5 for 25 minutes a night and create space for a player like John Morant to attack the rim. So I suspect you are going to see minutes for Jaren Jackson Jr. at the 5 for the Jazz, no question about it.
Absolutely.
But maybe it's not every night as a starter. And you know what? That's probably good because Jaren Jackson Jr. is a lousy rebounder.
Yeah.
He's a truly lousy rebounder. He's one of the worst rebounding big men in the NBA. What did you say? Is it 6 a game?
5.8 right now, yes.
He's bad.
Yeah.
Like, that's a bad number for a player with his size and athleticism. So you do have to have rebounding around him. And Lowry's a pretty good rebounder, but he's not like an elite rebounder. So he doesn't make up for it on his own. So I do think you still have to have a center. But maybe it's not a center who's playing 35 minutes a night. Maybe you're signing a center who plays 25 minutes a night. And then the question does become, can you play Walker for 25 minutes a night and have him be worth the $25 million he's going to get on the market this summer?
Very true.
That's the question I have and why I do wonder about this going forward. But you know what? Guys miss games. Guys come in. Walker is a great gear. And you know what I like? This is where the Jazz, I thought, made a huge mistake with Quinn Snyder, was they tried to have Rudy Gobert on the floor for 48 minutes, whether it was Rudy and Hassan Whiteside or Rudy and Derek Favors, whatever. There are very dissimilar players, or they are very dissimilar players in Jaren Jackson Jr. and Walker.
Yes.
So if at one point you need Walker and Jaren on the floor together in a playoff series, you can have them.
Yeah.
If you need Walker off the floor, you can play Jaren. If you need Jaren off the floor, you can play Walker. There is some mix and match ability that I really like if you do keep those two together from a basketball standpoint.
Which is something that was a flaw when John Collins was on the roster. John Collins and Walker Kessler couldn't play together, period.
Yeah, they got a little better last year, but again, the Jazz won 17 games, so how much better did they get?
Also coming in this trade, as you mentioned, you have John Conchar, you have Vince Williams Jr., and Jock Landale. Jock Landale is also interesting. He's averaging 11 points, I believe, right now. It's interesting because Walker Kessler's out, and a lot of the 5 minutes have been reliant on Yusuf Nurkic. You've even pushed Kyle Filipowski down there, even though I think everyone sort of realizes at this point he's more of a 4-man. And Jock Landale, he's a solid center. Like we've talked about many times, there are a million backup centers in the NBA. They're not hard to find. Despite that, the Jazz kind of needed that. And they bring that in, and I think Jock Landale will be able to fill some minutes with Walker Kessler out.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, who cares? In all honesty, this, and I'm going to send out a tweet right now, so you're probably not going to see this, but if you're listening, but I'm going to ask for some questions if people do have questions about it. One, I do want to address immediately that I think everyone was worried about is like, are the Jazz going to lose their pick this year? No chance.
Yeah.
Not a chance the Jazz are sacrificing the 2026 lottery pick that they have worked hard to hold on to play Jaren Jackson Jr. for 35 games.
Yes.
Not worth it.
No.
Absolutely zero value in it. In fact, you're going to see less Lowry now. I think you're going to see less Keontae now, and you're probably going to see very little Jaren Jackson Jr. over the remainder of the year, the same way the Washington Wizards acquired Trae Young and are not playing him.
Yes.
I don't think the Jazz are going to risk losing this year's draft pick by any means. Mm-hmm. In fact, the entire idea of this is next season, plus this year's offseason, but let's say starting in June, because the Jazz will know what draft pick they're getting, really May when the lottery hits, you're going to have a team that is Keontae George, Ace Bailey, Lauri Markkanen, Jaren Jackson Jr., probably Walker, I don't know yet, probably Walker, another top 5 pick or another top 8 pick, let's say top 8, in this year's draft, Cody Williams, Bryce Sensabaugh, Isaiah Collier, yada, yada, yada. Fill out the roster. But that starting 5 is pretty cool. That's a pretty cool lineup if you're a Jazz fan compared to what you have been watching.
Yes.
That's a very legitimate roster. And then if Ace hits and you get another top 8 pick, if you get a top 3 pick, like it has come together.
Oh, yeah.
Like the dream of trading Rudy and Donovan to sink to the bottom to rebuild greater will have become realized. And in fact, I think there's an argument that this is already going to be a better lineup next year than what those lineups were. Even though Rudy was, a Hall of Famer and Donovan's going to be a Hall of Famer as well, you're close to being back to that caliber of team, even if you're not competing for the best record in the NBA like that roster did.
Yes. I also want to ask you a question about this. You even mentioned how you were thinking about in the offseason, you were looking at Bam Adebayo, Jaren Jackson Jr., right? In the offseason specifically. But the Jazz make this move now, and it is a question, even though we already answered it, that what will happen with the Jazz's record and their lottery pick. Do you think that Triple J was getting traded by the deadline no matter what, and the Jazz had him circled as a guy that they wanted, and they just needed to hop in before someone else picked him up?
I think that was probably a fear that if you don't buy now, you're going to miss out on him. And because he's under control for 5 more years, it's not like you get another crack at him in 6 months.
Yes.
This is it. This was your opportunity. I think, as silly as it sounds, the Memphis Grizzlies last night beat the Minnesota Timberwolves, and if they want to hold on to their lottery pick, I mean, they get to hold on to their pick. I don't think it's going anywhere.
Yeah.
But if they want to maximize their lottery pick, every win is bad for them now, and they say we gotta pull the plug. We literally can't wait another game to pull the plug. And so they make a decision, in that game to lose. And I don't even know if Jaren Jackson Jr. played last night. I kind of had it on in the background, but yeah, they start to make this decision that we've got to pull the plug, and the Jazz say, if we're going to do it, we got to do it now.
Yeah.
And honestly, again, I've told you I'm a Walt Clayton Jr. fan. I really like his game. I think he's going to be a good player. I'm certainly not out on Taylor Hendricks, though the Jazz had kind of not put him back in the lineup. The Jazz did not give up any player quality here, certainly in return of what they got in Jaren Jackson Jr.
Agreed.
There is not what happens if this guy really hits? There's not a scenario where the Jazz don't get the best player in the draft of the bodies changing hands.
Yes.
There is a scenario where the 2031 Suns pick, and we haven't talked about the draft picks yet because they're a huge part of this, that this future Suns pick turns into a great player.
Yeah.
Turns into a number 1 overall pick. In fact, the Jazz may trade the number 1 overall pick next year. It could be that soon that the Grizzlies could get back. And do you have the details on the picks?
I don't know if they've been.
They have been.
They have been?
The picks
Okay.
have come out here. I'm sending out a tweet real quick. The picks are the Lakers pick next year, which is top 4 protected. The most preferable pick between the Jazz, the Timberwolves, and the Cavs next year.
Okay.
So 3 of those picks, if any of them hits number 1, whatever the highest pick is, it's going to the Memphis Grizzlies, and then the Phoenix Suns pick that they traded their 3 late firsts for last summer. The Jazz moved that pick. So the advantage for the Jazz is that they only gave up 1 of their own picks. They only gave up 1 pick that they have control over. And you say, well, why does that matter? In the Suns pick, didn't Justin Zanuck call it the most valuable asset? Correct.
Yes.
So by maintaining your own draft picks, you maintain the ability to tank or fall apart or start your rebuild however you want. When you're a team like the Phoenix Suns who traded all their own picks to get Kevin Durant, or you're the Milwaukee Bucks who traded all their picks to get Damian Lillard or Drew Holiday, as soon as it goes bad, but you don't own your own picks, you can't tank. Yeah. You can't start over. You can't hit the reset button because there's no value to it. You don't own your own picks. It's not worth it. You don't get any benefit out of it. That's why the Pelicans trading their pick this year was such a bizarre idea and why it's going to really haunt them. By holding on to all of their own picks beyond next season, the Jazz find themselves in a place where if this all falls apart, none of it works, the Jazz can still decide, well, we can control our future by owning all of our own picks. So that's why I really like the picks that they included here. The debt gets paid off almost immediately. It's your own pick gets paid off next year. Yeah. All gone. Fine. Then it's the Suns pick, which was always a great idea and wonderful and may turn into a really good player, but it was 4 or 5 years down the line. It was probably always going to be more valuable as a trade asset for the Jazz than waiting for it to realize in 2030 or 2031, whenever the pick comes in. And then the Lakers pick might be a lottery pick. We talked about in the show yesterday. Like, there's a chance that they lose LeBron, they don't totally retool this summer, and it's the 12th pick. Okay, if you end up giving the Grizzlies 2 lottery picks next year, if you don't make the playoffs, or the Cavs don't make the playoffs, or the Timberwolves don't make the playoffs, maybe you give them 2 picks. I will say next year's draft is not expected to be particularly good. Yes. There's a reason why the Jazz were not going to give up this year's pick and why they're still going to make sure they hold on to this year's pick. They were never going to put that on the table. Yeah. But they will put next year's pick on the table, and they already did. So that's the details of the picks and why I think the Jazz were willing to include what they did and not include what they didn't.
Also interesting, the Grizzlies now have the most. They have 12 first-round picks over the next 7 years, which is tied for the most in the NBA.
Yeah, they've entered their stage of where the Jazz were in 2022. Yeah. Teams are always waiting to do that. Teams are waiting to blow it up. And we have talked about this a lot. The Jazz made the Rudy Gobert and Donovan Mitchell trade waiting for other teams to blow up their rosters so the Jazz could come in like vultures and, kind of pull off the best meat. Yes. And that's exactly what happened today. That's what Jaren Jackson Jr. is. He's the prime piece of meat. That's a little vulgar, but he's the prime asset coming from the carcass of the Memphis Grizzlies. Yes. And they are falling apart. Ja is actually not the star on that player anymore. Jaren Jackson Jr. is their best player, and now he's a member of the Utah Jazz.
Yeah. Man, this is absolutely crazy. Thinking about, like you said, that prospective lineup next year, you have Keontae, Ace, Lowry, Triple J, and Walker Kessler. Of course, there are questions about Walker Kessler right now. The only people on the planet who know what's going to happen with that is the Jazz front office. I imagine the most likely scenario is that he stays through the trade deadline, gets his contract extension this summer, because I think, like you said, you would love to have both Walker and Triple J because there is so many lineup possibilities. And I think the name of the game in the playoffs is lineup possibilities. Like you see the Warriors, they had their big men like you had Andrew Bogut and eventually Kevon Looney, but they had the death lineup where you put Draymond Green at the 4. And I think the Jazz version of that would be very good. And man, we were talking about, maybe push for the play-in next year. I think the Jazz have a real shot at a top 8 seed next year with that lineup. Again, it relies on how many games everyone plays, first of all. Of course, how Lowry looks next year, how Keontae looks next year, if Ace Bailey can make a jump. But, man, the smoke just got cleared a lot for the Jazz.
Yeah, absolutely. No, the Jazz are going for it next year. And I don't mean necessarily going for a championship. I tweeted this out. Some people were confused, so I'll delete the tweet and resend it out. You don't do this trade and then wait during 2027, 2028, or 2026, 2027 next year to be like, well, let's just sit back and see how it goes. Like, Lowry's getting later in his contract already. Like, you're already going to be midway through his contract. It's a 4-year extension. This year's the first year. Next year will be the second year. Like, you're going to want to utilize as much time as you have Lowry and Jaren Jackson Jr. together.
Yes.
So, yeah, I don't think you just sit back and wait. I think you continue to be aggressive and try and build out the roster. You don't wait next season is just to sit back and put your hands in your pockets. No, this is about not being a top 8 team next year. It's about being a top 6 team next year.
Yes.
And ideally a top 4 team who gets to hold on to their draft pick or not hold on to their draft pick, gets to have a home court advantage in the first round. Excuse me. So yeah, that's the concept. And then if you look at the actual big picture concept of it, outside of Keontae George, who has good size, not great size, he has a good size for a guard. Ace Bailey's enormous for a 2. Lowry's enormous for a 3. Jaren Jackson's pretty big for a 4, and Walker's plenty big for a 5. Like, this is a big unit. This is a big roster for the Jazz starting next season. And then if you do add an AJ DeBonzo or a Cam Boozer or a Darren Peterson or whatever, Caleb Wilson, whatever happens this summer, you add one more body to that. You've got a good core that's ready to win in Lowry, Jaren, and I think you can probably put Keontae and Walker into that ready to win category. And then guys like Ace, guys like this year's draft pick, and then, the Cody Williamses or the Bryce Sensabaz or whoever, Isaiah Collier, that support that. It's interesting. It's a really interesting design. I'm not sure how many teams I look around the NBA that I kind of think are a comp to this. You certainly, you would love if you're a Jazz fan, if they were to look like the Oklahoma City Thunder and, they were to continue to break out at this level. I think that's probably a little bit too aggressive to say that that's where the Jazz are. But you look at young team, good players, some guys entering their prime with a bunch of still backstock, and they don't have as many picks going forward, but they still have Cavaliers picks, which, by the way, look like they get more valuable basically every day, especially with these James Harden trade rumors. It's just, it does feel like the Jazz are pretty well set up to not just make a 1-year run at it. This is designed to last 3 or 4 years. This is what the next 4 years of the Utah Jazz is going to look like, and I think they're only going to make, smart moves or ideally smart moves around it to better support this team.
Again, it remains to be seen what happens with the draft picks, of course, especially like you said, one of them's conveying next year. So we will see. But just looking at the player pool, I think this is an awesome trade for the Jazz. I really like what it makes the lineup look like going forward. I think, now when you bring in Jaren Jackson, who I said is 26, I think it sort of makes like Lowry fit into the timeline a little bit more.
No, that's a huge piece of it. I'm glad you brought that up. It bridges the gap between the 21 and 22 and 23-year-olds and the 28-year-old, soon to be 29-year-old or next year 29-year-old. You've bridged that gap.
Yeah.
If you were worried about, this young core and the one older guy, 26 is right in the middle.
Yeah.
It's kind of what we liked about Colin Sexton before Colin Sexton got traded. It was like, there's at least one guy in the middle. Jaren Jackson Jr. is very, very firmly in the middle.
Yes.
That's a good place for a young player that steps in. And honestly, if at some point you decide that Lowry is the piece that needs to be moved to make salaries or make room for salaries or find another star that has to fit better, Lowry being a little bit older and having a guy younger than him keeps your window open longer.
Yeah.
Like, in all honesty, it lowers your average age a little bit, because if you had to move Lowry, you have a 26-year-old backing him up who could be the next best player. The question for Jaren Jackson Jr. For me on this is that, has he been miscast during his time in Memphis? 2-time All-Star, again, made it as a 23-year-old, 1 Defensive Player of the Year, 3-time All-Defensive team member, twice to All-Defensive First Team, once All-Defensive Second Team. Has he been miscast, though, having to be the number 2 scorer on a team? Jaw's the number 1 guy, and now Jaren's has been number 2. Desmond Bane's in there kind of number 3 as well. he probably gets to pretty comfortably move down to number 3. You know,
Yes.
Lowry's going to be your number 1 guy.
Yeah.
Keontae's averaging 23 points a game. That's more than Jaren's ever averaged. His career high is 22.5 points per game, which is very healthy. That's a really good player. But he's not a guy who necessarily you're saying like, go get a bucket.
Yeah, true.
And the Jazz don't have a lot of those go get a bucket guys still. Keontae's the best at it. As far as creating your own ace, will get there, I suspect. But maybe you move Jaren now down to kind of the firmly the third option on the team offensively. And I'm curious, A, how he responds. Guys like to have their offensive touches. But B, does that unlock a different level from either his defensive side of the ball or his 3-point shooting as more of a specialist?
Another thing I like about this is we might see, like, assuming this core stays together, that is currently on the Jazz roster, assuming this is what it looks like for the next 4 or 5 seasons, we may see almost 2 versions of this Jazz team. Because say in 3 years, Ace Bailey is a 20-point-per-game scorer, maybe more than that. And then all of a sudden, okay, maybe Jaren's the 4th best scorer. Maybe him and Walker are 4A and 4B even.
Yeah, right.
So remains to be seen. We're having some questions rolling. Do you want to start answering some of those?
We got a lot of questions.
Yes.
I'm trying to see if there's anything else I want to look at. Let's look at the other players really quick on the team that are coming in.
Yeah.
Not really anything notable. You've got Konchar's under contract again next season. He has not been what they had hoped he was going to be when they signed John Konchar. I think they were kind of hoping they would get a little bit more out of him in Memphis. That has not been the case.
Yes.
And if you don't know about him, low averages this season, 3 points, 3 rebounds, 1 assist. He's only appeared in 30 games. Decent shooter, but weirdly can't shoot free throws at all. He's just like kind of 47% from the floor, 36% from 3. You're like, okay, that guy can shoot. And he's like a 70% free throw shooter, like kind of weird numbers. Has had some good seasons in the past, and it's why they were willing to keep him around. They kind of like invested in a cheap young guy who might be able to add something. Under contract again next season, but I wouldn't expect to be like a major long-term piece. Vince Williams has kind of been that guy in Memphis who you're like, oh, he's good. And it's like, no, he's not very good. Oh, he's kind of good. Memphis has done this with a couple of their young players, Gigi Jackson.
Yes.
They kind of draft these older guys or find these guys that can come in and be competitive. His contract is non-guaranteed next year. I think it's a team option. I can pull it up. I don't think the Jazz are getting other players back that are probably long-term solutions here. Like, I don't know if Vince Williams is actually like better than Isaiah or Cody.
Yes.
Certainly not better than Ace. So probably not a whole lot coming back for the Jazz that they're going to build with on this roster.
I will say, I mentioned this earlier for a brief second. Jock Landale, he's at 11 points a game. For the last 30 games of the year, he's actually very helpful for the Jazz, I think. But going into next year, when you have Walker and Jaren, and maybe Yusuf Nurkic comes back, then it's like, okay, where does he fit in?
And he might just be the replacement for Yusuf Nurkic.
True.
He is shooting 38% from 3 this year on 3 attempts a game.
Which is awesome.
Which is much better than Yusuf Nurkic.
Yeah.
And is younger, not a way younger, like Nurkic's not that old, but that might be your replacement for Yusuf Nurkic next year if you want to bring him around. Yeah. Like that might actually be a depth piece that you did get. Again, he's a unrestricted free agent after this summer.
Yeah.
So interesting on that front. Yeah, let's get to some questions. We got a lot of them.
Okay, first up, I'm going to quickly go through some stuff that we already sort of touched on, and then we'll get to other questions. First up from Ado, he says, biggest question everyone has been, does this change the plans this year, or did the Jazz continue and finish the tank like they should and would get a potential lottery guy?
Yeah, they're going to finish the tank
like
absolutely. They should. You're exactly right. You don't let this trade change the next 35 games for you.
Yeah.
Jaren Jackson Jr., let me pull up Jaren Jackson Jr.'s game log really quick because again he's played 45 games this year. Like that's the games. That's all the games they've played. He did play yesterday against Minnesota. He didn't play the game before that. Otherwise, this is one of the healthier years of his career. I just think you're going to figure out something to slow him down.
Yes.
You know what I mean? You're just going to slowly bring him back. You may not see him before the All-Star break.
True.
In all honesty, that's 7 more games or 6 more games now. That leaves 29 games left in the season. He plays 12, 14. And you make sure you don't put yourself in a spot to lose the pick. But yeah.
Glenn Anderson, love the deal. Scared we might lose our pick this year. How do we keep ranking with all the talent? I want to add, do you know if Jaren Jackson fits the player participation policy?
He's an all-star.
Yeah.
So he should. I would imagine some of that gets relaxed a little bit after a trade.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
As far as we're working him back into this new roster that he's never been before in Salt Lake City and all these different things. So technically, he definitely does. I mean, he's an all-star. Yeah. So he absolutely, I think, fits into the player participation policy. But I don't think that's going to scare off the Jazz from doing what they have to hold on to their pick. I mean, again, the Jazz didn't make this move without recognizing that, like, this year's pick is a huge part of the future.
Yes.
Like, We talked about OKC. Like the dream scenario for the Jazz is you get the number 1 overall pick. You have Lowry, Keontae, Jaren Jackson Jr., and Ace Bailey, and then you add maybe the best player on your team coming in.
Yeah.
Like dream scenario, the whole world comes together. You're competing for a title for the next 5 years. Like that's galaxy brain. Everything worked out right for Austin Ainge.
Yes.
It's not going to happen,
Yeah.
Overwhelmingly likely, but that's kind of the galaxy brain thought. There's no way the Jazz are risking losing this year's pick, I don't think.
Yeah. Next up from Laragon, what are your personal thoughts on what happens with Walker after this?
Again, he's already taking a step backwards. Mm-hmm. And then my question becomes, how happy is Walker's camp with that?
Yeah.
Like Walker does want to be, I don't want to say highlighted necessarily, but clearly there is some desire to like feel loved and be a part of what is going on with the Jazz and not kind of be viewed as an afterthought. Mm-hmm. And he's now always going to be the third wheel in the Lowry, Markkanen, and Jaren Jackson Jr. front court.
Yeah.
He's always going to be the third wheel there. Regardless, and he's going to be the lowest paid of that group. Lowry's going to make 40 plus. Jaren Jackson Jr. is going to be making 50 plus very soon. There's not that much money for him.
Yes.
Like, they can pay him. Again, he's restricted. You can go over the salary cap. You can go into the tax aprons, whatever you have to. But knowing that Keontae is going to get paid here coming up as well, Jazz are going to have to make some smart decisions financially. And the problem is once you go over the tax apron, it gets so hard to make trades.
Yes.
That if you're going to trade Walker, you probably have to do it before you give him a bunch of money. I know people are just like, oh, you just trade him after. It's like, it actually gets significantly harder to make moves once you go into the tax aprons. Yeah. So that's one thing the Jazz have to be cautious of. And I know like Tony Jones has said like the Jazz envision them together. Probably, I get it, but you do have to wonder, like, do you know that the Grizzlies, or not the Grizzlies, the Wizards or the Pacers are coming in with a $100 million offer for Walker? Or is it $140 million?
Yeah.
Is it $150 million? Like, you have to know all those things. And the good news is the Jazz do.
Yes.
They know about it more than anybody. But my personal thoughts is like, there's not $35 million on the table, I don't think, for Walker. If there is, that's your team. I mean, that's what the Jazz roster is going to be looking like, plus Ace Bailey and obviously Keontae, and then whatever happens in this year's draft.
This is a great transition. I'm going to combine two questions from Fire Mooch and Aaron Muranaka.
Can I say something, though, while we're on that point? So yesterday in the draft, or yesterday in our podcast, which you can go listen to, it's somewhat irrelevant now, but including our hypothetical trades that don't make any sense anymore.
Yeah.
One of the things I had said is that if it's not a top 3 or 4 draft pick this year, you probably trade it. If it falls 5, 6, 7, 8, you probably trade this year's pick. I think that's probably out the window.
Okay.
Because you're going to be so strapped financially before too long that having young guys on relatively low contracts that are cost controlled and then you own their rights in the future become far more valuable for the Utah Jazz than they would have been had you not traded for Jaren Jackson Jr. today.
Yeah. So Fire Mooch, he says, if the Jazz re-sign Walker Kessler, will they be in the luxury tax next year? What does that look like? And then Aaron adds, does this foreclose our possibility of going after Austin Reeves or Peyton Watson in the offseason?
Well, you're never going to go after Austin Reeves.
Yeah.
You have him in Keontae George, in all honesty. So that just wasn't going to happen, nor are the Lakers going to let him go. So next year... Shout out Spot Track, by the way. Great website. We had Keith Smith on our show earlier today on Jake and Ben, who writes for Spot Track. They've already updated it with Jaren Jackson Jr. So the Jazz's salary next year, it doesn't actually have the updated what the number is going to look like. But I will read you exactly what Keith Smith said because he writes for them and does excellent work with salary cap numbers. He basically said he expects the Jazz to be operating as an over-the-tax team or an over-the-cap team, not over-the-tax. He said over-the-cap team, which means, yes, you're limited with certain different tools you can use, whether that's mid-level exceptions or you're the taxpayer exception or you're the mid-level exception or you're a non-taxpayer, et cetera, et cetera. Those things will change. I don't think the Jazz are quite in the luxury tax. And by the way, this is one of the reasons why you wait to sign Walker Kessler. It allows you to have a little bit more financial flexibility, though it wouldn't have affected this year's trade. It affects what you can do this summer next to Jaren, next to Lowry, next to Keontae, et cetera, and then still sign Walker on top of all that because you own his rights. That is why you make those types of moves or those decisions.
Next up from Zach, he says, what other players we acquired do we keep?
My guess would honestly probably be none, but Konchar's under contract next year, so he's probably going to be around. Jock Landale, though, is not a bad backup center in the NBA. Not a bad backup.
Next up from Trevor Webb, would you throw 4 firsts at Minnesota to try and pry Jaden McDaniels away and help them get Giannis? This gives the Jazz the lineup of Kessler, Triple J, Lowry, McDaniels, Key with Ace, Cody, 2026 pick, etc. off the bench.
If I'm trading 4 picks, I'm trying to get Giannis.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not kidding. Look, if the Jazz really wanted to blow this up and say we're all in, this is a title team next year, you trade Lowry and Walker and this year's pick, or maybe not even this year's pick, but all your own future picks for Giannis.
Yeah.
And you say you're getting a 28-year-old all-star in Lauri Markkanen. You're getting your center of the future in Walker Kessler. You got to figure out what to do with Kuzma. You got to figure out what to do with Miles Turner. That's all a mess for you, but that's your mess. That's not mine. And here's all of our picks, and we want Giannis.
Yeah.
And then your lineup is Keontae, Giannis, Jaren Jackson Jr.
Yeah.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
But yeah, I'm not giving 4 picks, to get Jaren Jackson Jr. or Jaden McDaniels.
Yeah.
No.
Shane asked, will Ace be a 2-guard moving forward?
I've always kind of thought of him as a 3, but this certainly paints him into the 2 area. I've always thought he's going to play a little bit bigger. His ball handling is not very good, but he's a pretty good playmaker. He's a good passer in that sense. Mm-hmm. But if Jaren's your 4 and Lowry's your 3, Ace has to play the 2.
Yeah.
That's just kind of what's left for him. And so he's got to get better at some things. He's got to become a much better ball handler. There are areas he has to improve a lot, but you knew that when you drafted him.
Yes.
That was not no one's surprised now. But man, if he hits as a 2 at 6'7" and somehow 6'11" in shoes, it looks like when I walk next to him, you're an absolutely enormous roster.
Yes. Next up, Positive Jazz Guy. Can you rank the assets that win out? Does this seem right? 31 pick, 27 pick, Walt, 27 Lakers, Taylor, Niang, Kyle, and also what we got.
Repeat that for me. Sorry, there was a lot of numbers.
Yeah, so he's ranked the assets that win out. I'm assuming from the biggest thing to the least important thing.
Okay, great question. Love that question. The Suns pick.
Okay. Yeah, he had that in 1 as well, 31st pick. Or 31 pick, sorry.
The Jazz's pick.
27 pick, yeah.
I would then say the Lakers pick.
Okay.
And then I would say Walt, Taylor, and so on and so forth.
Yes, okay, gotcha. He also adds, I love the trade. I'm excited for next year's team. Next up from Spence Johnson, how many wins do you see the Jazz winning next year if the team is fully healthy and we get a top 3 pick?
45?
45. I think 45 is fair for first year.
You're going to have to figure this out.
Yes.
Say what this is a huge plus. And this is based on this roster. If nothing else changes, I think there's going to be more that will change. Yeah. And I don't know what that is, but there will be more. I don't think you just do this and then let it sit. Again, I think you start competing next year. Keontae's never won before.
Yeah.
Lowry's never won before.
Yeah.
Walker's never won before. Jaren's won.
Yeah.
But none of those other guys have ever won before. They've got to learn how to do this every night. Mm-hmm. And what happens if Keontae drops back down to being a 33% 3-point shooter next year? That's not crazy. He didn't shoot well his first 2 years in the NBA. There's going to be bumps in the road. This is not going to be a perfect fit. Lowry's going to have to figure out how to play with Jaren Jackson Jr., which defensively should be great. Mm-hmm. Offensively, there's touches that have to go around.
Yeah.
You look at it's not a huge number, but Jaren Jackson Jr. scored over 34 times this year. You introduce another guy capable of getting 30, it is actually disruptive. Yeah. Now, it's not a negative.
Yes.
It's overwhelmingly positive, but it's disruptive.
Yeah.
So that will be there. And I don't know if you become a top 15 defense because you add Jaren Jackson Jr. Yeah. Now, Jaren Jackson Jr. and Walker, if Walker takes a step, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
And if Ace becomes a better defensive player, that's pretty good. There are definitely ways this can work out where the Jazz get better defensively. But, it would be an enormous jump to go from the 30th best defensive team to the 20th. That's a huge leap.
Yes.
And then, how good ever is the 20th best defensive team in the NBA? They don't win 58 games.
No.
You got to play great defense to win that many games. So you're probably capped somewhere in the mid-40s.
Yes.
Now, that gets you into the playoffs.
Yeah.
And that's what the goal is right now. And then get into the playoffs and see if you have some mismatches and some matchups that just work in your favor.
A really great question from J-Bo. What do you think this trade means for Flip and his future in the rotation?
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I hadn't really thought about Flip.
Me neither.
He's the guy we haven't talked about at all here. Flip is a nice piece here now all of a sudden because he can play with Jaren Jackson Jr.
Yes.
That's a good option for him. He can play with Walker. He can play with Jaren. He can probably play some 5 while Jaren plays the 4. Now, he's not a good 5. Flip is a little overmatched at the 5, but he can play the 4 and Jaren can play the 5. You can kind of get... Jaren erases a lot of those mistakes. A lot of the issues the Jazz have when they play Lowry at the 4 or Flip at the 4, Jaren cleans up a lot of that. Yeah. He helps a lot in that sense. And he's not very big. He's 6'9". He's not 6'7", 11. What's he listed at?
6'10" on ESPN.
6'10"? Okay. Be curious what his actual measurements are. He's not like, and I've only stood next to him a couple of times.
Yeah.
He's not like towering guy.
Yeah,
but
like
he has very legitimate size. He's not undersized 4.
Yes.
You know, he's a legit, has good size for a 4, a little small for a 5. But he does. He probably makes Flip's job a little bit easier. That's probably a good fit for him. And Flip's got to rebound more.
True.
But it probably does give Flip a little bit of a sense of like, what do I need to be? What do I have to do? It's like, space the floor, be a good ball handler at your position. It kind of helps everybody.
And rebound.
Yeah. Rebound. Become a great rebounder.
Next question from Raji. He says, what does our timeline look like with this trade? Jazz against teams that will be good in the future, i.e. OKC Spurs, future Mavs, or Lakers after LeBron. Love the work.
Well, the timeline is great because he's under contract until 2029 and has a player option 29-30. And ideally at that point, you've extended him if you love him, you know, and you probably have and can if you do like him. So that's the real advantage is the timeline probably surpasses most of these teams. Now, look, we'll see what the Lakers are now owned by the same team that owns the Dodgers, and the Dodgers don't care how much money they spend. They just want titles over and over. Now, there's no cap in baseball, so that's doable, but you know, and the Lakers will run into that, but you expect to see a different operating Lakers. This is going to be a Lakers team that's willing to spend money where weirdly the buses weren't as much of a cash cow as you might have thought they would be. They didn't really have other money outside of owning the Lakers. The Spurs are obviously going to be good as long as they have Wemby. I don't think the window is necessarily closing for the Thunder immediately, but it's not open forever, but they're going to be good for a while. You know, there was another trade today that sent Mike Conley to the Bulls. And Pistons sent Jaden Ivey to the Bulls, and I'm not going to get into that. But the belief is that the Timberwolves are clearing money to go chase Giannis. Like try and get Giannis right now. Yeah. Well, if Giannis and Ant are together, that's a pretty good team for a few years. So, you know, the West is tough. But what you can't do, the mistake you do is just say like, oh, well, we'll sit out until the West isn't good anymore. Well, some teams thought that, and then Wemby came here. Yeah. And now Cooper Flagg is here. Like, no, the truth is, if you want to win the fight, you got to jump into the fight. You can't win a fight from the sidelines. And the Jazz just jumped into the fight. Yes. So are they going to be better than those teams? I don't know. Their timeline, though, was pretty long. Yep. So that's a good thing.
Combining 2 questions again from E and Sam Judd. When does Triple J debut for the Jazz? And then how many games do you think he'll play the rest of the way?
I'd put the over-under at 20. Okay. I'd probably take slightly under.
Yeah, I agree.
And I bet you he debuts after the trade deadline, well after the trade deadline. Okay. Because, and it may not be on the road. Yeah. Teams wait until the trade deadline to announce these things. So, like, it's going to be annoying you to watch the broadcast tonight. And the Jazz will be like, weird. No Kyle Anderson tonight. In fact, let me look at this. Let me look at my injury report. We get these. Kyle Anderson, as of 12:55, so this happened after the trade, is now listed as questionable with an illness. Though I think he was always listed as questionable, but they haven't updated his availability to like out. They will update it to out for personal reasons. That's what will happen, or they'll say not with team. Mm-hmm. But you wait until after the trade deadline in case somebody says, ooh, we got to make a move and we need some flexibility. Can we get in on that trade and the Jazz redirect John Conchar for a second round pick or something like that? So it won't be before Friday. Well, the trade deadline's Thursday, and then it won't even be the day after that because guys are going to have to come in and then pass physicals. And then I don't even know what the schedule is now. I think the Jazz play tonight, which is Tuesday. They play Thursday. They play Saturday. And then I think they play Monday. And then I think they play Wednesday. I'm going to say next Wednesday. Yeah. That'd be my guess.
I'm going to say a question and add to your point. Okay. Scally Nation says, I'm happy about the trade, but how did the Jazz tank now? You said over under 20 games for just JJJ. I'll set the over under for Lowry, Triple J, and Keontae playing in a game at like 5 and say maybe under on that.
In the same game.
Yes.
Not total.
Yes. In the same game.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And that's how they tank.
I think you're going to see Lowry play 17 games the rest of the way. You know, and Triple J is going to play 17 games the rest of the way. And by the way, we're not being cute. He goes by Triple J. Yes. Like that's his nickname. Yeah. That's not like we're like, let's do something. Let's debut something today. He goes by Triple J. And Keontae going to be hitting us. Yeah, you're just not going to see those guys a lot. Yeah. You know, the over-under on them combined might be as many games that the Jazz have left. Yeah. You know, total games played, maybe it's 40. Yeah. But I don't think you're going to see a lot of
them. Is the JJJ trade the biggest buy trade the Jazz have ever made? And is Triple J the best player the Jazz have ever traded for?
Let's see. I think they traded for Adrian Dantley. You know, and that's way back. We're going back. Yeah. I mean, Adrian Dantley was like the leading scorer in the NBA, I think, when the Jazz traded for him, or like was in that, had those abilities. So that was a huge kind of go for it trade. The Jeff Hornacek trade was a big go-for trade, though the Jazz traded like Jeff Malone for Jeff Hornacek, like not this.
Yeah.
Mike Conley was a big swing. Jazz took a huge swing to get Mike Conley. They went out there and it was Ricky Rubio. I can't remember what all the pieces were now going out for him, but and some draft picks. But yeah, not 3 draft picks of this caliber. Yeah, I think there's a real argument. This is the biggest trade the Jazz have ever made.
Yeah. From Tyson, does this mean the tank is over? No. For the season,
after this season, yeah.
After 100%, this season, yes. But for the rest of the season, no. Ryan Short asked, what is Jaren Jackson's game? Is he actually a 4 or a 5? And he seems hard to have only Keontae as a ball handler. I think he can do the 4 and the 5. I would, in my mind, he's more of a 4 because the rebounding is a struggle.
Yeah, he's probably... I mean, here's what the thing is. You know who was really good for the Jazz last year? Was John Collins.
Yeah.
John was really good for the Jazz last year. He averaged 19 points a game, shot a lot of threes. Jazz generated a lot of good looks for him, and then he was not very good defensively.
Yes.
But the Jazz did figure out kind of last year how to play John and Walker together.
Yes.
I would imagine a very similar role.
Yeah.
Offensively.
Yes.
And John averaged 19 points a game. In fact, I think technically he's listed as the Jazz's leading scorer last year over Lowry. So the Jazz do have some kind of proof of concept if they wanted to keep Walker with Jaren Jackson Jr., with what John Collins did offensively last season. And then when Walker was off the floor, John could play the backup 5.
Yeah.
So
next up from Braden, does this move solidify Isaiah Collier as our backup point guard for the foreseeable future?
No, but it makes him more likely than Walt Clayton Jr. Yeah. So, but look, he's been playing well.
He has.
And you know who he reminds me of? I mean, you know his style of play is he's a poor man's jaw. A really poor man's job, right? It's all speed getting downhill. Well, Jaren Jackson Jr. knows how to play with that guy, actually. So there might be some matchup there. I'm
glad you said jaw again because I thought of this and I wanted to say it. Do you think jaw is still fine in the West?
Yeah, right. Yeah. No, I'm really curious what happens with Jaw. I mean, they're not going to get much for him. Yeah. And they've hurt his value now by trading Jaren because now everyone knows you got to trade him.
Yeah. I'm looking through. We have been getting questions basically as I refresh every single time. Yes, from Clayton Searle, a lineup of Key, Ace, Lowry, Jaren, and Walker. Pretty light on ball handling and playmaking, ? Do you think this increases the chance the Jazz draft a guard with their pick? Seems like there are a bunch of guards in the area the Jazz will be drafting. Yeah,
that does get more interesting, actually. It's kind of funny. The Jazz, one of the weird parts about this year's draft is there's not good bigs. If you're not getting Cam Boozer, it's really guard heavy. Yeah. So you look at, is it Kingston is the guy in Alabama? Again, or at Houston. I haven't watched all these guys, promise you. I haven't watched enough of these guys, and I will. As we get closer to the draft. But it's like Brown from Louisville. It's Kingston. It's the kid at Illinois who's rocketing up boards now. And then it's AJ's a true wing. He's the most wing in this class. And then Darren Peterson's it is a lot of guards outside of Cam Boozer. Jaden Quinton's probably going to be in the top 10 as well. And he's a big. But no, it's a lot of guards. So if the Jazz now had to grab a guard, you're probably okay with it. Yeah. Because your front line is set. Yes. If this is the front line the Jazz want to have, their front line is set.
Shout out to Green Bin SL. He asked if the Jazz are still tanking for a pick this year. Answer is yes to that. Next from Connor Morris, 2 questions. Are you surprised by this big of a trade? What's the Jazz's defensive ceiling if we keep Kessler? Top 10 defense? Are there any other players you would love the Jazz to get to add more depth? If we're talking ceiling, that's not next year. That's probably 2 or 3 years once the lineup has a chance to gel. And I think depending on what growth you see from both Keontae and Ace on that end, and of course who you draft, I think just with Jaren and Walker as your 4 and 5, I think you absolutely could build a top 10 defense out of that.
It gives you a legitimate front court. Yes. You have 2 legitimately good defensive players in the front court, and Walker by himself is not a defensive system. He's not good enough.
Yeah, he's not Rudy Gobert.
If he's your second best defender in the front court, now all of a sudden he's probably really valuable, and you have one of the best rim protection units in the NBA. Yeah. Jaren Jackson Jr. here, let me pull up his numbers. I mean, he's led the league in blocks twice. Yeah. Sorry, let me get to his overview here really quickly. Jaren Jackson Jr., even this season, is averaging 1.5 blocks per game. He's a career 1.9 blocks per game guy. That's right about where Walker is as well. I mean, you've got a very intimidating front court defensively. Yeah, when it comes to finishing at the rim.
In his Defensive Player of the Year season, he had 3 blocks a game.
Yeah, he can get up there. Yeah. He can get really big numbers. So Yeah, you have a suddenly very sturdy front court defense front court defensively. You've got to figure out what you're going to do in the back court. But that's where, Ace can play some value. Cody sneaky, his value kind of went up. I think I'm buying Cody stock right now. Cody's life got a lot easier, I think. And I think there's some positives there for him.
I will say it is it says a lot that the Jazz opted to send Walt Clayton and Taylor Hendricks before Cody Williams.
So I had, I did a segment with Scotty G after my show wrapped, and it was kind of thinking like, why did you move off from Taylor Hendricks now? And like, obviously he didn't play very well this year, and whatever, we were going to give him as much room as he needed, and I think rightfully so. But like, the emergence of Cody has made Taylor far more tradable.
Yes.
Now that you have Ace and you have Flip and you have Cody, you have three guys that will play that 3-4, 2-3-4 kind of range. And Cody will get to that spot where he's heavy enough, I think, to play some 4 for small stretches. It just kind of rendered Taylor a little redundant.
Yes.
Not bad. I mean, he's still probably the best shooter of those three, but a little redundant.
Another part we should touch on. Are there any other players you would love the Jazz to get to add more depth? Maybe not a specific player, but what do you think the Jazz need now? Do you think it's perimeter defense?
Yeah, they need a really good perimeter defender.
Yeah.
They would really benefit from a good 2-3 that can switch all over the floor. So
Agreed.
yes, Jaden McDaniels going back. I mean, he's not a 2-3. He's more of a 4, but the type of player that could switch all around the perimeter and eat up space and, would really be beneficial. And that's how the Jazz could climb to a top 15, top 13, top 10 defense in the next few years. So, AJ hasn't proven he's a good defensive player yet, but if he could turn on become that type of player, that'd be very helpful.
Connor Morse adds, also, does this mean the Jazz use the trade exception? Do you expect more trades from the Jazz?
Yes, more trades for the Jazz. I don't know if it's in the next 48 hours, but I think the Jazz are going to probably be pretty aggressive this summer to round out some pieces. There's no reason to wait anymore. Now, that doesn't mean cash in all your future draft assets. In fact, I would not touch my draft assets.
Yeah, agreed.
But if I can make some little moves here and there around the edges, I would certainly consider that.
Yeah.
And, you still have picks now. I think you still have – I have to go back and update the Jazz trade asset tracker that I keep at KSLSports.com. So if you want to know what draft picks the Jazz have going forward, some of those are definitely altered, and I will keep that fixed. But by trading next year's 2027 pick, you still have the Cavaliers' 2029 pick, which again could be super valuable because the Cavaliers are apparently trying to acquire James Harden for some reason, which is bizarre. But like, if you did want to trade a pick, you could trade that pick this summer, still hold on to all your own picks, and try and build out your roster a little bit more.
Yeah. So the questions are slowing down. So I think if you want to, we can call it here. And I'm sure there will be questions that roll in eventually that we won't get to, but we can also retouch on this when we revisit next week.
Any final thoughts?
I think this is an awesome trade.
If you had to grade the trade just where we are today, which is so early, it's hilarious.
Yes.
But like, if you had to grade it, what would you give it?
I would give it an A-. If it ends up in the Jazz dropping in the lottery odds, I'd give it a B+.
Yeah, I think the only risk, I guess, is that it could slightly, but like the Jazz aren't going to let this. Yeah, the Jazz aren't going to let this minor hurdle affect them getting the draft pick this year. So, man, it's hard to not give it an A, and I mean that seriously because it's just like you cashed in player. I like Walt. I like Taylor.
Yeah.
Obviously George and who we haven't talked about either is Svi is going to be a part of this rotation going forward. Like Svi's going to be in this group next year because he's so cheap.
Yeah.
You didn't give up on like Flip. You didn't have to include like a guy who you're like, ooh, that hurt. Yeah. There was no like, ooh, that hurt, other than picks, and they weren't your own.
They weren't
picks.
Your own. Yeah.
Like that's the real value here that I think is why I'm comfortable saying this is an A.
Yeah.
As of today. Now, if it doesn't work out, this could be an F.
Yeah.
Like this could fail, this could flop, and Jaren Jackson Jr. could not be a fit at all, and it could get worse. Not worse than 17 wins, but worse. And now you're pot committed with a guy. Nice thing is you can always trade Jaren if you had to. But A, because the debt's going to be paid off so quickly. Yeah. This draft pick next year is going to be gone. It's not going to matter at all.
Yeah.
The Lakers pick you don't have anymore, so you don't worry about that. You're not tracking somebody else in the standings. The more favorable of your pick or the Timberwolves or Cavaliers means you still have a pick next year.
Yeah.
Right? Because the worst one, I don't know where it ended up, but it was a part of the Phoenix Suns trade to get that 2031 pick. But you were going to have 3 picks next year. You only have 1, and it's still the second best of your pick, the Cavaliers pick or the Timberwolves pick. So we'll see where that falls. But you do still have a pick next year to work with if you want to add another young player. But otherwise, the debt gets paid off. You're not worried about the Phoenix Suns pick anymore. Like, you're not worried about, like, what happens if they start getting good? Does that pick drop in value because they hit on a draft pick or whatever happens? So in that sense, and then you're just not going to care, honestly, that Taylor's gone or that Walt is gone.
Yeah.
You know, in hindsight, you probably should have just paid off your debt to the Oklahoma City Thunder that year and not gotten Taylor or not gotten Cody.
Yeah.
Now one of those is gone. You're going to get the pick this year. That's going to be expired. That debt's going to be paid off, and you're going to move on. So as of today, I mean, you don't get all-stars entering their prime at 26 years old who address exactly what your problem is very often.
Yes,
and that's
exactly.
what you got with a defensive stalwart who can add a lot to your offense too, who really fits the timeline.
Yeah.
Maybe perfectly.
Yes.
So really good work by the Utah Jazz. Very interesting to see how this continues to fall out. I'm guessing, barring another huge trade, I won't podcast again until Thursday or Friday.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we won't. We said yesterday we'd definitely do one by the end of this week. So we have paid that off for sure. I will guarantee you there will be another podcast before the end of the week. It might be me and DJ Thursday. It might be Chandler and I Friday. I don't know.
Yes, we'll see.
But there will be more, and of course we will let you know. Thanks to everybody who tuned in. Really fun to have the community of Jazz Notes listeners who want to engage right away and come to us.
Yeah, basically live answering questions.
It does mean a lot. We could have gone live on Twitter. We probably should have, but maybe next time.
Yeah.
Find us at KSLSports.com. Continued fallout from this trade. I will write it all up. I'll update the Jazz draft tracker, et cetera, and we'll be back with you later this week.